We're always on the go. We're juggling meetings, our families, our commitments, on top of all our own self imposed pressures during the holiday and to get it all done. It's been called an occupational phenomenon. It is so huge that companies like Nike, LinkedIn, and even Bumble shut their doors for a week in recognition of this phenomenon. It's burnout. It's affecting our mental health every day. Employees are on the move nonstop, feeling the pressures to show up and perform, and all too often hitting a breaking point. I'm Prakriti Poddar, the Global Head of Mental Health and Wellbeing here at RoundGlass. I'd like to welcome you all to today's live event on how to deal with burnout. This is part of our exclusive 12-session workplace wellbeing series. Throughout this series, we're featuring wellbeing experts from around the globe. Throughout this session, please share all your questions on this chat. We'd love to have that. It makes it more interactive and really personalizes this experience. So what we're going to focus on today is burnout, how to deal with it, what kind of solutions we can build internally and externally with the people around us. We also ask what leaders should be doing in their organizations to support their teams, to build in peer-to-peer support as well, to avoid this phenomenon. We have an incredible panel of guests that I'd like to introduce to you. Our first guest is a transformational leader and an executive coach who burned out while working in the tech sector in San Francisco. She is the author of Pause, Harnessing the Life-Changing Power of Giving Yourself a Break. Pause, the journal, and how to intentionally write to create your dreams is getting published soon. And in fact, you can pre-order it. Also joining us is the author of If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Happy? Dr. Raj Raghunathan. He is a professor of marketing at the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas, Austin. And over 400,000 people have enrolled in his course, A Life of Happiness and Fulfillment. Welcome, Dr. Raj. Joining us now is one of our RoundGlass yoga teachers and author of Power Yoga, Strength, Sweat, and Spirit, Leah Callis. I want to welcome everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we begin, I want to invite Leah to lead us through a short reset.
Thank you, Prakriti. So please come into a comfortable seat. We'll take a moment to get centered and grounded. So go ahead and sit up nice and tall, lift your spine high, ground your feet onto the earth, and then do the same with your hands. Place your palms down on your thighs. And either close your eyes or set your vision at the floor and soften your gaze. Start to turn your attention inward and focus on your breath, the natural flow of your breath. Whenever you are aware of your breath, you then become present in your body and in the now moment. And the tradition of yoga teaches us that the now moment is when life happens. So we'll do a few short breathing exercises to help us to get even more centered and grounded. All together, let's take a big breath in through the nose. Feel yourself get full and brighten from the inside. Open mouth, exhale, let it all out. Get empty. This time, breathe in through your nose and we'll hold your breath in at the top. Continue to expand from the inside out for 3, 2, 1. Exhale through your nose gently, steadily, steadily until you are empty. Pull your belly back and hold your breath out for 3, 2, 1. Inhale again through your nose. We'll hold it again at the top. Feel your body expand. And exhale through your nose. Breath retention at the bottom. Pull your low belly back, empty out, cleanse yourself. One more time. Inhale through your nose, fill up and brighten. You're generating your own energy. And exhale through your nose, empty out, empty out. Emphasize the emptiness, the clear canvas. And now breathe back in through your nose. Open mouth, exhale. Seal your lips again and breathe naturally through your nose. And notice the quality of energy within you now. Notice the connection you now have access to with your body, with your mind. And know that a simple breathing practice to reset your energy is always available to you. Let's meet with our hands united at heart center. In prayer hands, Anjali Mudra. Lift your chest up higher into your thumbs. And gently bow your chest towards your chin towards your chest, your head towards your heart. Release your hands to your thighs. Blink your eyes open, ground your vision at the earth, and now lift your gaze. Thank you, Prakriti.
Thank you. And Rachel, I think I forgot to mention your name because your transformational coaching and leadership took over my definition. But Rachel O'Meara is the author of Pause, and I'm really excited to have you here with us. I want to start this session with a definition of burnout. The World Health Organization defined it as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. I mean, of course, I read this and it said that's such a limited definition because it excludes all the people that may not be working who deal with burnout. So, Raj, I'd like to ask you to shed some light on what the symptoms are for burnout.
Thank you, Prakriti, and thank you everybody for inviting me to this awesome session. And thank you, Leah, for leading us in that exercise of breathing. That was really, really good, and I needed that. Okay, so burnout can be defined in, I think, many different ways, but a common feature of burnout is, of course, a sense of exhaustion. It is related to a state called attention deficit trait, which is associated with a sense of irritability, a sense of impulsiveness, a sense that things are out of control and there are too many balls up in the air and you can't juggle all of them and a lot of them are going to drop. And there is a sense of great anxiety as a result of it. And all of this, of course, leads to a sense of not being as effective as you could be, particularly in tasks that require creative thinking, kind of subtle decision making as opposed to black and white decision making, the kinds of decisions that we typically make. You know, the people on this panel, the audience, we don't work in menial jobs, right? We work in jobs that are more mental, more creative. And so those are the set of symptoms associated with burnout, just this feeling of I'm not capable of being my best self.
Thank you, Raj. I really love the fact that you described this, and I want everybody to do this. As you start listening to what's being said, introspect and look for the moments in your life where this might have played a part. Just listening to you reminded me of an incident that took place yesterday with my son and my daughter. And my son starts yanking my daughter, my son's 13, my daughter is about 9. He starts yanking her, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I want to go. I have this assignment to finish. It's going to take me 4 hours. It's already 9 o'clock and she's not moving. And he got really upset and I couldn't understand what he was doing. And my natural reaction would be to, curb that down by being very sort of dictatorial. But I was like, okay, let me just take a moment. Actually, there were people around me, so I couldn't be dictatorial. I said, okay, let me take a moment and let him adjust. But now that you mention it, it was clearly burnout. He was feeling the signs and symptoms. And this is not, again, going back to that definition, it isn't just in the workplace. Your children may be going through it. I want to move the conversation to Rachel. I know that you faced burnout. And from what Raj just mentioned, what were some of the symptoms that you had that highlighted burnout for you?
Well, there were a lot of symptoms at the time that helped me realize that something wasn't right. But I think the biggest one was, for me, I thought I had to do more to get out of burnout. And I feel like that's something that we automatically go to in our own logic, but it's actually the opposite. So for me, when I was working at Google, it wasn't for a lack of effort. It wasn't for a lack of trying or wanting to do good. I would simply go in every day and say, today's the day it's going to be different. But then around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the latest, I would start to feel hopeless again. I felt like a failure. I felt like I was spinning my wheels. So I would try harder. And I use the term muscling through it. And so I think that's a big telltale sign that if you feel like, oh, I just need to try harder, or, okay, I do feel like I'm spinning out, or I feel like this is not going well, I'm just going to do these 5 different things different. The chances are that's a good start, but it's probably not going to get you out of burnout. And there's a whole nother shift that can happen. And that's what I call a pause, an intentional shift in behavior that can help us move into feeling more aligned and resourced.
Wow, Rachel, that's incredible. It kind of reminds me of an abusive relationship almost with oneself. When you're really trying to overcome something time and time again, thinking it's going to bring about a change, and yet it presents itself every day. That is chronic abuse. And I think that, even though we're calling this a phenomenon, I think just your statements of how people sort of, how people do this to themselves consistently is a really important highlight. So thank you for sharing that. Leah, I know that you experienced this at a younger age and became really aware and decided to change the trajectory at that very sort of young age, which, like I said, you still look that young, so I don't want to harp on that. But I'd really like you to talk about your experience of what that felt like for you, and the courage that it takes to put a pause, as Rachel mentioned.
Thank you, Prakriti.
Well,
I started feeling these symptoms of burnout when I was in my mid-20s, and I was working in the high-stress, fast-paced world of political campaigns. And I actually started experiencing numbness in my body, started in my right foot, and I kept overriding these signals from my body. And I kept pushing through, as Rachel said, muscling through. That's definitely how I felt like I was living. And I was sleeping with my BlackBerry next to my head and working 7 days a week. And I really lost sense of myself, and I let my work life consume the rest of my life. So I continued to push forward, and eventually half my body was going numb. And the day that I took action, I wound up in the emergency room with the right side of my face going numb. So in my mid-20s, I had a couple of really scary initial diagnoses from doctors in the emergency room that it could possibly be MS or that I was having a stroke. But it ended up being severe muscle spasms from an injury when I was a cheerleader in college that I hadn't properly cared for my body. And so that physical injury that I got buried, and then I piled on top of it more stress, and my body was literally wound into knots, disconnecting me from my life force. So for me, it was less about courage and more about a total breakdown that caused me to wake up and start living with more purpose and more connection to my inner guidance rather than external validation.
That's amazing. I would call that courage. It would take me courage. And what this reminds me of is I was talking about when I moved from India to the States, there was a lot of talk about stress. And honestly, being an Indian and growing up in India, we just had no concept of stress because it wasn't a word that we ever used. And there was another one, and this was in college because I was at York University in Toronto. And there was another word that people would use a lot, and that was peer pressure. And both these things tie into burnout. And I remember saying, I remember telling my husband, I don't even know what burnout is. Like, why? I mean, sorry, what peer pressure is. What is peer pressure? And he said to me, he goes, you probably don't know what peer pressure is because you were the peer pressure. And I was like, what? Bringing me back to the fact that as leaders, because we're working with leaders and this conversation is for leaders, I think we have to be so aware of being the people that do not encourage burnout. And I say that because we always have we project certain sort of job finalities that need to be done. And that can add a lot to the kind of pressures that people face in an organization. And I think it's really important to start talking about that because we're talking with leaders. And I know that, Raj, I'd heard you talk about the fact that, hey, listen, if you know what's going to make you happy and, why are you not doing that? And, really talking about that model of, I wanted you to talk about the model from an employer point of view as well as an employee point of view. How do you prevent burnout from taking place on both levels?
Yeah. So one thing that I want to say right up front is that you can do more for your own happiness and mental well-being than anybody else can. It might seem like an obvious statement to make, but I think it's worth reminding people of that. So rather than you as an employee waiting for your organization to do something, I think that you should take certain steps. Ultimately, burnout happens because we take on more than we can do, right? And so you got to realize that you have limited capacity, limited energy to give, limited attention to give. And so you can't do it all. I think that we are tempted to try and do it all because, there's this FOMO and availability of resources that make it appear as if we can do it all. But really, I mean, you can only do so much. When I was starting my PhD, my advisor used to tell me, you got to pick 2 out of the 3. Okay. And the 3 things were work, family, and friends, of course, included in that, and your own health. Okay. which 2 are you going to pick? So it's like that, I mean, you really have to kind of help yourself. And in that regard, I think that identifying the set of things that make you feel a sense of centeredness. So leading a healthy lifestyle is super important, right? Getting a good 7-8 hours of sleep every night is non-negotiable. If you're not getting that and you're saying, oh, I'm feeling this burnout, what do I do? Life, modern days are so screwed up and, life used to be better back then. That won't really help, right? You got to lead a healthy lifestyle fundamentally. Okay, so that's with regard to what you can do. And of course, employers can do a lot too, right? And the big thing to recognize for employers is that the employees, if they burn out, they're not going to be as productive. They're not going to be as creative. You're not going to be as profitable. And so just prioritizing employees' well-being and mental health is big. And I think that once you prioritize it, a lot of things follow, right? I mean, if you truly, sincerely, authentically prioritize your employees' well-being, then you're going to ask for how they feel sincerely, and you're going to sit down with them and talk about their problems on a regular basis. It doesn't need to be very frequent, but let's say once a month, and so on. And so I have a course called Happier Employees and Return on Investment course. It's on edX. And in fact, I've, for the course, interviewed a lot of people, including Sunny Singh, who you're very familiar with, Prakriti, who I don't know if he's the CEO of RoundGlass. I know they founded RoundGlass.
He's the founder of RoundGlass. This is a company that doesn't have any CEO.
And he actually said that what he does is he encourages his managers to do this as well. He meets his co-workers and people, direct reports, on a regular basis. In fact, I think he said even on a weekly basis, just informally over a cup of coffee, just to kind of inquire, how are they doing? How is life going? How is work going? No real agenda, but just, to find out how they're doing. And he said that he picks up so much from those meetings, and the managers that work with him in his company also pick up a lot from those meetings. And so the idea is to truly deeply care. I don't think that there is one kind of silver bullet that we can mention here and say that, okay, if you do this as a employer, then there's going to be no burnout in your organization. I think like I said sometime back, burnout happens when there is more to do than you can achieve. And as long as that discrepancy exists, there's going to be burnout. And so the idea is to kind of figure out ways in which you assign tasks that are appropriate and commensurate with the abilities of the people, and don't overextend them. Basically, that's what it boils down to.
Thank you, Raj. I know Rachel's been resonating with everything you're saying. As a body language just proves that. Rachel, you've actually spoken a lot about the kind of things that one can do to add value to their life, to prioritize, to audit. I would love to have you showcase to us, how do we go about auditing our life, and what helps us save ourselves from a complete breakdown?
That's such a great framework, auditing ourselves. I think of that as self-awareness, and you are the CEO of your to-do list. I think that's such a great way to think about things. So you can always have the choice to change. I think first and foremost, that's one of the biggest things we forget, especially if we're feeling stressed. I think of it like a spectrum. You've got overwhelm, you've got stress, you've got burnout, right? So you might be anywhere on that spectrum, but you can always check in and ask yourself, how am I doing right now? And I don't think I ever realized that I could do that. I didn't have the self-awareness to even ask myself that or know how I felt. If I knew I had felt so frustrated or afraid or hurt, all of these feelings that were kind of stirring inside of me that were even spinning me out more, if I'd had an opportunity to think about those and express them or know they were there, and that's the self-awareness, that's the audit, then I think that is really important. And I had 5 signs that I talk about in Pause the Book and that I experienced that I think are really good to audit yourself. And I'll go through those really quickly. So one is, you used to love your job and now you loathe it, or some extension of that. The second one is, your manager tells you, whether it's indirect or directly, that things might not be as good as you think they are, or you might want to consider doing something else, or thinking about different things to do. And then in my case, that was what happened. A wake-up call I had was my manager sat me down and said, I don't know if this is a fit for you. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably not a good fit. The third thing is you need a technology intervention, or you have one. And that could be you yourself saying, oh my gosh, my phone is right next to my ear. My BlackBerry's right there every day. That's is that okay? Or you're at your dinner table and you can't put your phone down, or your hand starts to hurt because you're on your phone scrolling so much. The fourth thing is a challenge. So maybe there's a health challenge you're dealing with, or someone else's issue that is in your realm. And the fifth thing is there's an opportunity, which is kind of the flip side of a challenge, right? Maybe there's a passion project that you've been wanting to start, or something else that's knocking at your door. And so those 5 signs, if you're listening to this, and just do your own audit, if one of those is there, that's a sign, I think, that calls for a pause or something as a shift. And that's an intentional shift in behavior.
Well, thank you. And I know that your 5 documented steps have been quite widely sort of read, and I think they're really practical. Going sort of more forward pacing it to more practice. I think Leah, you come in there. There's so many different ways that you're also building practice, for not only for yourself, of course, but for everybody here at RoundGlass. How do you practice that pause? What are some of the tips and tools and resources to build that resilience and that muscle of allowing yourself to pause.
Yeah. Well, if anyone here who is listening today or is a member of RoundGlass, you're well on your way. Honestly, this is a big step, I think, is taking time out. And again, a pause is an intentional shift in behavior. So that could be a lot of different things. It could be a breath, like Leah led us through in the beginning. That to me is a great pause. And breath is such a powerful way to feel a little more present and be more aware. It could be a forced pause. Maybe you're laid off, but also then you decide what to do differently from there. The idea is that you can choose what works for you. And there's various pauses. I have many different daily pauses. And the idea is that this can become a way of life. So when you do pause, and that can be, again, many different things, it works for you. So for one person, it might be going outside, walking around the block at lunch. And another person, it might be brushing your teeth because you don't have the time to go outside at lunch, but you're really in your five senses. You're noticing the bubbles on your teeth and the toothpaste and just really honing in on that. And research tells us when we're in our sensory perception, like what we feel, see, touch, smell, or taste, our brains are operating in a very different way that gets us out of that tunnel vision, that task mode. So daily pauses are great. I have a whole checklist for that. And the last one I'll mention is knowing a feeling. And when we, just like the breath, we have to be in our bodies to feel the breath. When we name how we feel, and that just might be, oh, I feel fear, I feel anxiety. That gets us in our bodies. And then we become more present and we get out of our minds, which is kind of, I think, what a lot of us do, which is living from the neck up. And I know I was a big culprit of that myself.
Thank you. I love that, living from the neck up, because it seems like we're also communicating from our neck up nowadays, just on Zoom. Leah, I really want to get back to you because we do pre-meeting meditations, we do post-meeting meditations, we do in a meeting moments, and you're building those mini practices as well. Can you shed light on that? Can you highlight those things for everybody that's here so that they can incorporate some of that in their workplace as well?
Yes, absolutely. And one thing I think is important to remember is to not think of this as overhauling the whole system, but instead bite-sized bits that can ground you into awareness and calm in the moment. So one thing I know when I was going through some of my transformative times is that I felt like I had to change my whole life in order to get back on my path of living with joy and purpose. But really it's about practicing when you remember or when you start to sense that you've gone too far in one direction. So these are practices to restore yourself. And at RoundGlass, we start and end our meetings with mindful moments. And that's really 1 minute to 5 minutes of bringing everyone together to simply breathe, to feel, as Rachel was saying, and to set an intention so that we are aligning around an energy and a purpose. And if we don't have it individually, right, when we come together as a team, then we can all align around that greater purpose, that higher vision that helps to carry us forward. Because when we are burnt out, sometimes it can be hard to look up, right? And that's one practice that one of my main teachers taught me is when I'm looking down, when I'm hyper focused on the details, to simply take a pause from the details and look up to what's guiding me forward, what's the guiding light. A couple of quick practices in just affirming everything that Rachel said, but one that you can do in any meeting to help restore yourself is simply press your feet down on the ground. Press down through all four corners of your feet. Then you will physically get grounded in your body. Or you can bring one hand to your heart or one hand to your low belly, which there's so much research and information telling us that the low belly is the second brain. So when you use your body, your physicality to presence these major energy centers within you, your mind and your body start to work together in a union. And so we get out of that neck up thinking and we take our seat in our full bodied wisdom. So remind yourself with your own physicality, grounding your feet, taking a deep breath, using your hands to remember.
Thank you. That's great. I want to get back to the question of the great resignation. And Raj, this is for you. there's been like so much talk of like 4.4 like billion people who've resigned, and burnout has been really high, and there's you know more about this than I do. I would really like to understand what's happening here. How does it
Yeah,
reflect on
so
what
I
we're talking
I sent out a survey to my students. As you mentioned sometime back, about 400,000 students have taken one of my online courses. And so these are people from all around the world. Um, and many of them work, many of them are also stay at home moms or dads. I was just curious about the Great Resignation. Although we know that a lot of people are resigning, it's not entirely clear who these people are and why they're resigning and how can they even feel like they can afford to resign, right? I mean, you have enough saved up. And one of the things that's coming out is that there is a bunch of people who are relatively older who are resigning because they just kind of accelerated their retirement, I think. Okay, and I'll leave out those set of people because they're resigning maybe for the right reasons, if you will. But there's a bunch of people who are younger, who are between the ages of, let's say, 30 and 50, who are also resigning and resigning in greater numbers. And a large part of it is a recognition that, hey, this life of working from home and taking care of myself and taking care of my the people who are dependent on me, or maybe it's even pets, and having some time to reconnect with my hobbies is not such a bad thing. And if you belong to a family in which your spouse is working, and it turns out that you don't really need that second income, particularly because you don't have to spend on things like commuting or buying new clothes, etc., then you feel like, what, I think that overall this is a better life in terms of emotional and mental well-being. So I'm seeing a lot of data coming in, which is somewhat surprising to me, that people are resigning because COVID, in a way, has been a little bit of a blessing in disguise for them. They're reconnecting with things that truly matter to them. I'll give you my own example. Okay, so this is really, really interesting. I moved into this neighborhood about 16 years ago, in the neighborhood in which I live now, and I did not know my neighbors. Honestly, I did not know my neighbors at all. Everybody would lead their own lives, get into their cars at early in the morning and go to work and come back. And then COVID hit, and one of the first things that we did was to acquire a dog. Okay, until then we didn't feel like we had the bandwidth to actually take care of a dog, but we got a dog, and then we started taking the dog out for walks around the neighborhood, and we noticed other people with dogs. It's a curious thing when you have kids. Other people notice, especially they have kids too, and they say, "Hi, oh yeah, your baby looks cute," or whatever. Um, but with dogs, I think the engagement is even more somehow. They don't feel at all any reservation in commenting about your dog's looks or cuteness or personality, and they want to inquire what breed it is and where you got it from, and what kind of things the dog likes to do, and inviting you to play dates and so on. Okay, so it really grounded me and got me connected with my neighborhood and the society around me. And Leah was talking a little bit about how to ground yourself and putting your feet on the ground, right? I mean, like stably on the ground. I think that walking is such a great exercise for grounding, especially around your neighborhood, and to recognize the trees that are there and the kind of personality, if you will, of the trees, and how they change colors over time through the seasons. I think that when you have a very busy life, and like somebody said, living from neck up, you don't really get to enjoy the small, ordinary, everyday pleasures of life around you. And in a way, I think COVID has made a lot of people realize that, hey, I was seeking the extraordinary, and I thought that that's the only way to really maximize my happiness, when there's really little pockets of pleasure and happiness and utility and well-being that I can get from little things, having a nice cup of tea and watching the sunrise, or taking my dog for a walk, or getting to know my neighbors a little bit more and hanging out with them in an impromptu fashion and having a glass of wine or what have you. And I think I'm seeing in my data, at least, a lot of evidence that a lot of people are resigning for the quote unquote right reasons, because they're discovering that they don't need that, extra income. They don't need that fancy job. And they are, in fact, a little more centered, a little less burnt out by being at home. And living off of that second income, or the first income, if you will, of the other person. I hope that kind of answers your question. This is early days, and we're still kind of looking at the data that's coming in, but it does look like there's some fascinating things going on.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is mindful living, and people have the opportunity to do a little bit more of that, because it's kind of like a forceful pause almost. I had that when I mean, I'm an unfortunate candidate for burnout because I'm always on the go, and I thrive on that. And I've been lucky so far that I haven't really experienced burnout, but I can see that I'm treading like on very thin ice here. But I think one of the things that helped me as well during this, not only this time, but just in life, is the fact that I have a sports bent of mind. I need to play, I need to do that regularly. Otherwise, I don't feel like I can balance myself. And balancing is obviously the key to any kind of mental happiness. But I want to also talk
like
about.
Me too, I think. Sorry, I was just going to say, you're addicted to kind of physical exercise. It seems like, addicted. No, that's so important. So important.
Yeah, it is. It's the adrenaline boost that you get. It's the kind of hormones, the pheromones, like everything comes together and gives you, the serotonin levels balance out for me. I've always sort of needed that in my life, but I think that talking about what Leah was talking about as well, which is the mind body connect, and we've all realized that either your somatics adds value to your sort of mental health, or your mental health adds value to your somatics. And obviously talking about the gut, the complete cycle is so important. Rachel, you've been talking a bit about mental flossing, and you have a technique called the taser technique. I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, thanks. I think I use that term in the book and in my courses, mental flossing. Think about you're flossing your teeth, right? What are you doing? You're getting the gunk out. You're kind of, making sure you feel healthy and that you're at the best your mouth health can be. And I feel like that can be very similar for our brains. So mental flossing, there's many different tools, and we'll talk about taser. And I also just want to comment that it takes courage to bring any of these things in, to just kind of say, hey, I might need a change here. And I think that's the very first step, is the choice to do something different. So what's taser, the taser technique? Well, it's an acronym. So when you think of a taser gun, a stun gun, it's like you got a little zap, right? Like zzz, zzz, like you're like, oh. So the taser is an acronym that I use to zap me out of a state that might feel a little negative, which is also a symptom of burnout, right? We kind of live in that negativity. So T is tune in. So maybe I had a thought like, oh, yeah, I'm late because of the traffic again. Oh, terrible. What do I want to do now? So tuning in is like, oh, like how interesting. I'm blaming the traffic. This is just an example I'm making up on the fly here. A is acknowledge. And so that's oh, wait, I just had this thought. So you're actually tracking your thoughts, right? You're thinking about, what did I just do? Kind of that observer mind. S is shift. So shifting along the lines of, what could I think about differently? So I could say, well, there was a lot of traffic and I did the best I can. It's a reframe. Or it could be, I will leave earlier next time. That probably could help me out. So there's the S, and then E is express. So E is simply, it's a extension of acknowledging. So say it out loud. Say something that helps you feel better. It might be, I will leave later to avoid the traffic. Or it might be, oh, I could think about this differently. And then R is repeat. So just keep doing that. And you might notice more and more thoughts. And that's the awareness that you're building. That's that mind-body connection that can strengthen every time you do that. So that's the taser technique. I invite you to try it today.
Thank you. I love that all intelligent people have acronyms. We're on to Raj and your acronym for Bamba. I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, BAMBA is an acronym that stands for the 5 major determinants of happiness or well-being at work. And the first B is basic needs. Um, Needless to say, you're not going to be happy if you don't know where your next meal is going to come from as an employee, or if you feel that you don't earn enough income to meet your family's requirements for medical attention, education, transportation, and so on. And then the first A stands for autonomy. You need to have a sense that you are given the authority to go about do your work to the best of your capacity, not to feel micromanaged by people, especially your boss, and to have a sense of voice, that I can safely express what I truly feel in this organization, and that it's going to count and people are going to actually respect my opinions. So that's autonomy. And then M stands for mastery. All of us have competencies, we have aptitudes, we have skills, and we feel frustrated when we don't get opportunities to exercise those skills and develop those skills and become masters, in our own domains of choice. So that's M. And, I just want to very quickly point out that we work about 100,000 hours over our lifetime, over 30, 40 years. In our professions, and that's twice the amount of time that we spend with our own families if you take out sleeping time. So we actually spend quite a significant amount of time at work, and work is a context in which you are actually incentivized to become better at what you do, right? You're given resources, you're giving training, and the organization, your team wants you to improve, and it's in your interest to improve too, because you get into flow states when you're good at doing what you do and so on. So it would be a big shame if you're not progressing toward mastery at work, I would say, given all that. So that's M. And then the second B stands for belonging. We are highly social as a species, probably the most social species there is. There's lots of work showing that we really can't be fully happy unless we enjoy healthy relationships, particularly with people who are close to us. And it turns out relationships matter even in our work, even at work. Gallup's, yeah, everybody's familiar with Gallup, right? I mean, the organization that collects all this data around the world, and they've been collecting data for over 50 years from 140 countries around the world. And their top line finding is this, that people don't leave organizations, people leave people. Okay, so if you don't get along with people, you're going to leave your organization. Okay, that's how important our sense of belonging is. And there's work showing that if your best friend works in the same organization that you work in, your chances of quitting the organization are halved, right? So it's hugely important for us belonging, even in the workplace. And the final A, I refer to that as abundance culture. So the culture of the organization is one in which your successes are celebrated by your peers, right? So you don't have this sense that this is a zero-sum game and there's only one place at the top, and for me to win, somebody else has to lose. But rather you have the sense that everybody is in this together and we can all grow together and we can all rise together. It's a difficult thing to pull off, but if in good organizations, they manage to do a better job of it than in organizations with poorer cultures. And so that's the abundance culture. So if all 5 of them are there, and of course you need to do things for yourself in order to advance toward fulfilling those goals, but your organization and leaders need to do their bit as well. But if all 5 determinants are checked off and are fulfilled, then you're going to be really happy at work.
Awesome. Actually, that brings us to the statement of being safe in your workplace and being safe, creating a safe environment and a harmonious environment. And this takes us to the question that somebody from the RG community has asked. How do you have that conversation with your boss about the feelings of burnout? Like, how do you feel safe enough to do that? I'd like all of you to shed sort of light on that.
I can jump in first. The
Sure.
thought is to be honest with whatever you're comfortable with. Maybe be a little vulnerable, but also know that it's in your best interest because this is you in the transition to align. So my 2 cents is, yeah, go in with something to share that maybe your boss doesn't know. Just, hey, I'm not doing so great right now, and share a little bit more about what you're experiencing.
Thank you. Raj?
I let Leah go. Water went down the wrong path.
All right, so really over to you.
Yes, I would say begin with a practice of personal inquiry. So when you start to feel these feelings of burnout, give yourself some space from what you're feeling to how you can articulate it. So journaling is such an amazing process of doing that. Also spending some time asking yourself, well, what is it that I want? What do I really want here? So getting to what you're feeling, and then also what are some solutions so you can have both parts be a part of the conversation with whoever you are working with.
Well, thank you. I used to do a lot of HR training, and I'd asked one of these very important CEOs that, what are you really doing about well-being? And he goes, listen, I pay them enough. I tick out all the boxes. I don't really care. They need to do it for themselves. So going back to, how do you really feel safe to be able to be that expressive? Because you don't know how they're going to react to it, right? We're hoping that everybody is going to react positively. Raj, over to you. That same question.
Yeah, so it really is the leadership team's, I think, obligation and responsibility to make employees feel the sense of psychological safety. It's huge. Psychological safety is huge. Ethan Burris, who's a colleague of mine at Macomb School of Business in the management department, did a huge study, and he's published papers on this topic, that it may be the single biggest determinant of a team's productivity is how safe they feel, right? And it really is, I think, too much of an organization to ask that the employees who are at the bottom rung, just somehow feel safe to voice their true opinions. Let's say that I have an opinion that goes against my CEO's opinion, that I just express it. So it really is the responsibility and the obligation of the top management team to provide that sense of psychological safety. Having said that, I think that what employees can do is to earn the right to be respected, right? And really, this is not rocket science, right? I mean, this is quite straightforward. What you need to do in order to earn the right to be respected and given that psychological safety and voice is that you're diligent. You show up for work when you're supposed to show up for work. You manage your energy levels in such a way that you're there present when you're at work, and that you stick to the plan. If you're supposed to achieve certain things or send in a report by a certain date, that you do that. Or if you're running behind, then to inform the boss or people in your team that, hey, I need a little more time and here's why, etc. So you need, as an employee, to do your bit to earn the right to be given voice, right? Right to be given autonomy. But at the same time, the management team too, needs to do its bit. So it's a kind of a marriage of the two. Almost any of these 5 determinants that I talked about, there's a role for the employees, and they have to take responsibilities and do a certain set of things in order to earn the right to achieve autonomy or to achieve a sense of mastery or belonging, and so on and so forth. But the organization needs to do its bit as well. I want to go back to the practice that Sunny Singh told me about. I do think that this is very relevant in this context. I think that if a boss meets with all the people that report to him or her on a regular basis, let's say at least once a month for half an hour, without really any agenda, just to inquire about their health and goings on, and basically touch base with them in an informal setting, the employee is naturally going to feel a sense of, I've been given voice. I've been given a sense of psychological safety that I can express anything and everything that I want, and I'm going to be heard. And if that continues on for a while, then that company or organization is going to build that culture of providing psychological safety, right?
Thank you.
So
So this really brings me, sorry, Raj, did you want to say something else?
No, that's it.
All right. This brings me really to the end of what our time together is, or we just ran out of it. But I wanted to, sort of culminate the conversation because a few words kind of still sort of stuck with me. Rachel, Leah, you mentioned you were a cheerleader, and I think, Raj, you've mentioned time and time again that if you help yourself, then only can things change for you. So definitely, be your own helper, create that space. And I think, with everything that Rachel, you've talked about in terms of the tips and strategies really to bring this to life and Leah, your capability of ensuring practice. Yeah, in moments versus like, let's take this much time off and focus on our well-being. I think, all this really comes together to create a very robust model to help you with your own burnout and feelings of that. And throughout this workplace well-being series, the subject of mindfulness and its benefits will be an ongoing conversation. You've seen a few examples of it. Everybody's spoken about how you need to really introspect. That's being mindful. Walking your dog. And I like, just to wrap up, I love that statement of you saying that we're social animals and your social life came more with another animal as well. Like, I mean, we're not just human beings who are social animals. We need the entire environment around us to support us. Anyway, that's aside. But thank you so much for being here, Rachel, Dr. Raj, Raghunathan, Leah Cullis. And thank you to all of you who have been watching this. And we really, encourage questions. Would love some more eventually in our upcoming sessions. But thank you for the questions that you shared today. Stay connected to us and our community at RoundGlass, on our app, at any time. And until the next time, work and live mindfully. Thank you so much, and goodbye.